I have not done my homework. I have no idea what we're talking about tonight. But I'm really happy you're here. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Have you done the homework? I haven't done the homework. I have no idea what we're talking about tonight.
I have no idea where we are or what we're doing.
I'm standing there in the hall looking at all my books tonight going, there's got to be a topic in here somewhere. I mean, seriously, like how can we not have a topic?
We rave too hard.
I definitely did. No, I actually got to have a nice sort of vacation-y visit this weekend, and I'm not telling anybody where. Yeah, so maybe kind of, I don't know if it was too much partying. Definitely, there was some rooftop viewing of city, which was very cool. So that was nice. Yeah.
And did you have good food?
I was not fed well. No, there was some decent pizza. Actually, no. So the first day, there was Mexican food, which is great, very good for that. And then, oh yeah, since this was a raving visit, I spent the afternoon sitting in the library. Which is probably why I like doing my homework. I was looking at the book that I was reading in the library, and I was thinking maybe we could talk about that on early Christian art, because in fact one of the reasons that my homework is suffering from Mosaic Ark is I'm actually writing an article called the Mosaic Ark. I realize, so the Mobius strip is encircling itself now. Shall I tell you about what I'm writing?
Oh, please.
Oh, yeah, good. Okay, so this is actually like deep backstory for why we were doing Dragon Common Room in the first place. Are you ready? I'm not even sure I've told you this story, so this is a good one.
No, I just do things without knowing what's happening or why we're doing them.
It's great. No, I'm like, Kilt, we're sailing, and she's like, yeah, let me on. Okay. Yeah. This is actually super important as like thematics for exactly how crazy I am to invite my team. We've actually I've also spent the last 48 hours trying to rewrite our website, because
yes,
the cover for Draco Alchemicus Act 1 is now drafted. I think there's still some design work being done on it, but it's so beautiful. So we're going to press soon. Everybody watching that is one of our Kickstarter supporters, watch your inboxes. We're going to be begging for addresses soon. I just forgot what I was talking about. What was I talking about? I was excited that we were going to press.
You took us on an adventure, but we didn't know where we were going.
Oh, right. And see, this is like, I'd be totally lost without her. So one of the most important things that we had to do was define ourselves clearly. Which you realize we were like, the new website is up now, and you all can go visit it and look at it. It's still dragoncommonroom.com, but it has like a better like a description of who we are. The one that now doesn't exist, that I was like trying absolutely everything. We're a trading school for virtue and poetry, and no, we're alchemical, which we still are. No, we're transforming. No, we're good stories. It's like, how many ways can you try to describe what we were doing. It's interesting that it was so difficult, right? So we've understood now that we are a team, which is good, and I think kind of necessary for me. I realize that this stream can go everywhere because it will like fold it. We're also going to demonstrate to you what our writing process is like in tonight, because it's like show up at writing time. We show up here because it's our stream time, so we actually have to fill the time saying something. Pro tip: if you actually want to write books, that's what you have to do. You literally simply have to show up when you said you would and start working, right? Which this is going to be the story of my triumph over my academic writer's block and the topic that is now the Mosaic Ark. But the primary, like everybody listening, you want to be a writer? You sure? You're really sure?
Yeah, are you sure?
Well, but that's what I mean. So we started Dragon Common Room 3.5 years ago, right? 2020, May 2020. And I was just saying, show up. We're going to read a poem together that I'd written with my first co-writer, Cheryl. And then we're going to start writing, and all sorts of people showed up, right? And I think this is also why naming us is kind of challenging, because we've been a changing group over the various projects that we've done. With like Centrism Games was one set of people, and Aurora Borealis was a different set of people, and now Drake Alchemicus Act 1 has one writer that's not really working with us anymore because life, and the sort of crafting of the team has been a real challenge. I'm going to say applications are not open right now because we cannot absorb any new energy while we're writing the book that we're working on right now, and that's going to take us a few more years with Draco Alchemicus. But
it's like the crew of the boat. We really do. We've got like a little pirate ship, and the crew just kind of changes up every book.
It has, yeah.
Same fundamental crew, but yeah, there's a few changes, and it makes it interesting. Every adventure is different.
I mean, so yes, we're sailing around. We're going to have a new banner, right, that will like hopefully make more sense of all of this. So we're sailing around and collecting stories and connecting threads and doing our mosaic arcing through the mosaic, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But you got to stick around to find out what I've alluded to at the opening. That certain people have different strengths for certain kinds of stories, I think. And with Centrism Games, it was a little more political, so some people were more interested in the kind of culture commentary direct, and Aurora Borealis was for kids, and so it had a different energy. And then Draco Alchemicus is, well, we figured it out. That was the other thing I figured out this weekend in the course of working with the designer to make the cover like what we're actually writing. Draco Alchemicus. You will recall that it's had various
Good to know. We know now.
Well, it's got through various subtitles, right? It's like it was an electric pirate fantasy for a bit.
Yeah.
Which I still think it is. It was a fairy tale, but not spelled Fairy, but of course FAE umlaut RIE, because that's the way Tolkien just talks about fairy. Alas, it's not really a fairy tale. Well, no, the thing is, it still is. I mean, all of these things are still true. But then as you're writing, a lot of writing is it's alchemical. You realize all of the descriptors we were using still apply, right? But at some point we had to like speak to the normal world that doesn't think perpetually in metaphor and cross references and allusions, at least until we get you, and then we'll make you into us. Apparently, I was told also this weekend that in working on this design that one of the things that we fail at because of the way not fail. One of the things that we bring to this project is we're women. And there's the playing with Lego problem where men playing with Lego want to do the designs that it's given or make new structures or sort of work with the materials and stuff. Women want to make the Lego into themselves. I think that's our witchiness is going to come in, because we're just like we will get to do an All Souls stream this year. I think, I don't know when Halloween is. Anyway, that
Yes.
women want to make their their charges into creatures like them. So we actually want all of you all to turn into poets by way of hanging out with us.
Yes.
Learn to think like us.
Well, I don't know. You said that. I was amused when you said that the first time, because we're inviting you all to get very weird, basically.
So, and we worked on various subtitles. Okay, so I still didn't tell you what Draco Chemicus is. It's a love story.
No.
It's a love story. It always has been a love story. And if you've been with us in the Mosaic Ark for the last year, you realize that we set you all up in the Mosaic Ark to be the thing that is helping you understand the process that we're going through, among other things, right? It's like we're sailing around and collecting things, thinking about them, arguing through them, figuring out where we are in history, figuring out where we are in the media and such. But we actually started at the very beginning. So if you're new to the stream, go back and look in our archive and find out that we started with first the grammar of the internet, which was the medium that we're in, and the way in which the McLuhan insight takes us into a particular kind of experience because of that medium. And then we went into the prophecies, and we were reading Habakkuk. I think there was a wombat in that one, possibly. I can't remember.
That's when
there was some wombats. Yeah.
The destruction of the first car.
yeah, when you ran into the little concrete butt. But then we talked about the Mosaic Ark itself, which is what we're in right now, which is kind of trippy to explain, which I'll get to in the article that I'm writing right now. And then we talked about Christ the Lover Knight. And then we say, okay, now these are all elements of the story that we're trying to take you all into, which is the love story of God for his creation.
Yes.
I can say it plainly when pressed. And then I say, maybe this is like, have you done the homework? Have you read enough for me to be able to make this make sense? You know, at what point are we able to say, yes, I found that illusion there and this illusion there, and these two things connect. And if we put them together into the mystery, it folds in back on itself, and suddenly you see Christ.
So it's a simple explanation, in other words.
I'm sort of amused. It's like I have said this all along, and then finding out. I mean, the writing is also taking this. It's like you hide and you hide and you hide and you hide. And I do have to. The best homework anybody listening can do if you're really wrestling with your writing is Style by Joseph Williams. And it's subtitled 10 Lessons in Clarity and Grace, or Lessons in Clarity and Grace. Depends on which edition you get. He kept rewriting it. And a good deal of what he teaches in that is how you take particularly academic prose that's all abstractions and nominalizations and indirections, and nobody ever causes anything. You realize it's like bureaucratic speak of anything, right? It's like, bombs were dropped. No agent, nobody to blame. It's just they fell out of the sky. It's like, babies were killed. No, you see what's on my mind.
Yes.
That it's avoiding agency, avoiding action, avoiding actual well, in storytelling terms, it's actually avoiding saying what's going on. And always trying to like veil it and cloak it and such like that. And I realized in the revisions that I had to do on the website, describing who we are, we're a team, is I was trying to protect us as the agents in all of this. It's like, no, you guys, we exist, we're a team. And then we actually were working through this as a group of yesterday or day before. You know, when we want to say what we're doing, it's like we write, right? But no, you want to transform or illuminate or enlighten or, you know, train or stimulate. It's like, well, actually, writing is a magic of its own. So why not just say write? And then sort of by way of what we do, how we do it, we basically study. We read a lot. We read a lot, you guys, like ridiculous amounts. And there's bibliography on the website to help you find all of the footnotes that we're not putting in the poem, so that we can, in fact, write original stories grounded in traditional Christian symbolism. You see how much better I am at it now? So we're a team of poets and artists who study history, literature, mythology, and art to write and publish original stories grounded in traditional Christian symbolism. I'm ready. I can say it in an elevator.
Yeah, I was enjoying the revision phase of the description, because, you know, I struggled to communicate verbally half the time. So so what do you mean? This makes perfect sense. It all makes perfect sense. But that's the good thing about the writing process. With DCR, we just did with the website what we're having to do with the stances all the time, which is just eliminate fluff, be precise,
Right.
Be savage, and get rid of things that are unnecessary, and you know, have the shotgun put all of the meaning out there without any ambiguity. So it's good. It's good. But I think, see, I struggled with this when we first started to work together too, because we live in a very unambiguous culture. A very ambiguous culture. The communication has been influenced by that bureaucratic language so much that the shift into being direct can sometimes be difficult for people to do, even in a conversational communication. So learning how to write more directly influences the way that I'm speaking. I can feel it after having worked on these projects with the Drakes for the last few years. Yeah.
Do you find, so does it give you courage to be able to speak plainly now?
No, there's just no lag time between formulating a thought and saying it as clearly as I would like to have said it.
Sorry, there's no lag. There's that you find it's.
Oh, the lag. The need to kind of purposefully clarify took more time before,
and it's easier now. Ooh, the training works. That's good.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Well, you know, we've talked about this some, and maybe just to reiterate things like having to write in the poetry, which I do think we've talked about. Having to write in the poetry makes us very mathematical. It's like you're having to write in a certain number of syllables with a certain number of beats, certain sounds so that they work together and the rhymes and such. And if you can't do it concretely, you can't say anything. And it's like having all of these things slot into their places in the stanzas. I've been thinking about that, about how people, if you're trained in writing poetry, which is ironically about, you know, sort of reference and metaphor and you actually can think more clearly about reality and be less susceptible to people's fog of pretending that they can hide behind, because you've had to practice making things incredibly real in the sense of visual, I mean, visually real with the language, so that you can't hide behind anything. Ironically, and then I couldn't say it on our website that's what we were doing. It's like, we're poets. Okay, we're a team of poets, and being able to work together. I have asked, you know, in sort of practicing getting out there and talking about our process, I keep pitching it to people in public, so that you get to like, I know everybody listening, all three of you. Where is everyone tonight? Clearly they didn't like my Bitmoji tonight, saying like, you know, we got homework tonight. Really? You want to? Yeah, seriously? The next time anybody comes to me and says, I want to be you, and I can remember how many people actually showed up for this stream live. Yeah, right. They're us. The ones that are on watching right now, they get to write with me. The rest of you guys don't, because you weren't here live. I mean, that happens too, right? It's like I get, and this is the sort of watch out when you become a writer and you have actually struggled through the years and years and years of, you know, just regular practice and being there at the page and maybe showing up to your live stream even though you don't have an announced theme and talking about it because you're trying to kind of avoid the fact that babies are being killed. No, wait. We can get to that. You get to the point where you finally achieved it, and here's a story, and suddenly there's all these people that want to like be on your team. The little red hen knew. You have to have done the homework. You have to have been here. You have to have done the practice. It does not magically come out of your inspiration of, oh yeah, I want to write. It's a lot of just drill.
Yeah, and presenting terrible ideas and realizing what I just said was absolutely nonsense.
In your head right now, or just in discussion in tonight's writing?
What a good question.
Yeah.
No, in tonight's writing. No, but in general, I mean, like when we were saying in the session today, you know, I've got this anxiety about the scene that we're writing at the moment because there's so many elements going on. It is really, really complex. It's a complex scene. The act that we're working on now. There's a lot of things happening. We're putting so much in there, and it's like trying to balance all of these things and at the same time make it beautiful to read. It's really, really, really hard. So yeah, you can't just I mean, I would not have thought that I was going to be able to work on something this complex when we started the projects a few years ago. And being able to track so many different things at once, and yeah, it's taken a lot of discipline. A lot. She says knowingly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly before we started, I'd written books, but
yeah,
at which, you know, and this is another thing. It's like, just, okay, so I promised I'd take attendance, right? So of the people I see here, it's Mel, who's on the team, Casey, who's on the team, and Fat, who actually has done all the homework. So good for him.
Yes. Hi, Fat.
He says, yippee. I think that was earlier, but keeping all the threads together, keeping all the elements together.
Before.
Yes, well, yeah. And it takes the same amount of just sit down and do it, right? Sit down regularly, go back to the practice, and then there's a kind of magic that's delightful, right? It's like if you just come and you've done it and you've done it and you've done it, the magic happens because you're there regularly, not because you're waiting to be inspired and then you'll write. Forget that. It's never going to happen that way. It's always only going to happen if you practice it so that you are in the space for the magic to come and to happen. It's like it literally cannot happen otherwise. And there's nobody who ever does just artistic work of any sort. But I think it must work in terms of like playing with Lego and doing designs and stuff too. It happens because you're there, not because you're wandering around hoping that you're going to do it when it feels perfect. That's not the way it works.
No. Well, I started playing piano just because I was in lockdown and there was a piano in the house. Okay, I'll sit down and I'll play this thing because I've got literally nothing else to do. And then started writing music. So yeah, I was just doing it every day.
I thought you'd been writing music before that. You all realize Kilt's played our intro to the stream.
Yeah, I've written before, but not on the piano.
Okay.
It was not my go-to instrument, and I don't know how to read music, so I do everything from ear. So it's it was just I'm just sitting there and playing around with the keys, going, oh yeah, there's a chord, there's the other chord, sort of all just. I had no idea what I was doing. So until that came out, which is good.
Well, so that's like saying, it's like we haven't done our reading tonight because I don't know what we're talking about, and it's interesting because we're doing this very literary writing of the poetry, right? It's like we write in our chat, and it's all happening at the level of craft. We can text, right? And I do realize, the sort of use of the internet as an artistic medium, being able to write into a chat like this. It's like the digital medium has enabled us to co-write in a way that it's hard to imagine happening in any other way. I mean, if we were all sitting in a room and throwing out lines and somebody having to transcribe them and stuff, it's like it's interesting. Our suggested writing, and we can use the voice messages and stuff too in Telegram, but it happens at this sort of perfect pace for crafting poetry, which ironically has the structure and form that it does, at least in the very highly metered and rhymed forms, because it's back in the day when the bards would compose it simply orally and not writing it down. It's a nice kind of proof of McLuhan's claim of new media reclaim obsolete forms, that this new medium of being able to write into a chat and the internet in time has reclaimed the older form of this structured language. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. Well, it feels like you're all there wherever we are when we're in the chat room, when we're doing these writing sessions, and typing. And yet it's like there's 3 other people in my head working on the same thing at the same time. It's very, very strange feeling.
Yeah. And I was thinking, someone is, people have asked me, how do you, are you all together? Or where do you meet? And I'm like, well, we meet online, right? We meet in this internet world, and we're writing the poetry for the internet world. The internet that Christ has entered into because of our technology now, the word into the internet.
Yes. Holding a mirror up to it.
Yes. Which has given me the ability now finally to write about some texts that I'd been wrestling with in my scholarship for decades. I will now tell you about them. So back when I was doing my dissertation research, I was working on images of Mary in the Song of Songs, in the Song of Solomon, and one of the delightfully trippy things that medieval commentators did with the Song of Songs, as I've told you all before, but we'll refresh you because I'm sure you still need to read From Judgment to Passion in full, everybody, because then you'll know what I'm talking about. And also my dissertation was translated into French this past year, so you could read it in French if you want. it's also in English, but the French version has some translated texts and appendices that the plain old English dissertation doesn't. So there you go. Anyway, I was working on the way in which these medieval commentators use the Song of Songs to imagine Mary and Christ. There's imagining the love story, right? Our love story. They're imagining the bride and the bridegroom talking to each other in the poem as Christ and Mary talking to each other and it's in this kind of interesting space because it's somewhat in their life together on earth, sort of meditations on what Mary says to Christ as her baby, holding him at her breast and loving him. There's some wonderful passages in the song where I'm searching for my beloved throughout the city, and so they like taking that as Mary's quest. Most literally in the historical sense, when Jesus is hanging out at the temple at age 12 and Mary loses him and then she has to find him, right? So they say, well, that gives you that sense, but also losing him and looking for him in contemplation. They use different, there's different images, like there's the whole description of the bride in Song of Songs, book 4, chapter 4, that they use then to meditate on all of her virtues or something. And there's a description of Christ as bridegroom, and you can do similar things. The passage that has the most power typically is in chapter 5, where the beloved put his hand through the lattice and my belly trembled at his touch. Ooh. It's like, what is that? Is that the moment of the incarnation? Is it the moment of, usually it's the moment of the incarnation, so that Christ enters through the lattice into her. It's all very sexy and completely mystical. And you realize, if I can think about this for decades, no wonder I have mystical on my mind. And we were saying with this, our Mosaic Ark is a mystical exploration. It means on these different layers, right, of all of these different modes of understanding. Well, when I was working on all of that, I had the problem of trying to figure out how to explain it to anybody that these commentaries made sense, and I got a bit overwhelmed. And there was another text that wasn't a commentary on the Song of Songs, but it was called a epithalamium, which is a fancy Latin word for marriage song. It's like a hymn sung, or a elaborate song sung at a wedding. Mm-hmm. And it's a 13th century text called an Epithalamium Beata Maria Virginis, marriage song of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which... Wait,
say that again slowly.
Epithalamium.
Yes, and then the next one.
Beatae.
Okay.
Mariae. Virginis.
Okay, good.
BV.
People want to look it up.
Well, they can't yet because I have actually done a draft translation of this from the Latin into the English. There's an Italian edition. This is a lot of cool backstory, right? Okay, so there's an Italian edition by Antonio Saiani. He did the Latin and an Italian translation that came out in 94, 95. I'm not exactly when the publication date was, but I had already been working on this text before his edition came out, because I went and looked at the manuscripts in London and in Oxford. And in London at the British Library, they had little booklets that he had been publishing. This text has been like impossible for anybody to make sense of, because the Latin is incredibly difficult, purposefully so. You'll find out in a second why. And Cyanide started working on it, and he'd been publishing like bits of it over the decades, but it took him like 30 years to come up with finally the translation that he published. And it's been taking me 30 years if I come out with my translation, which I need to now. This song, you think this Mosaic Ark is trippy? Well, I'm now writing the article that's going to explain what's going on in this text, finally saying I get it, why it's been so hard to explain what's going on in this text, because it's trying to do what the entire early tradition of devotion to Mary was trying to do, which is explain exactly how you can say that God enters into his creation. It's been on my mind for decades now, because it is I'm very happy because I'm writing about this now, the very best poetic effort to explain this sort of inside out, through the looking glass mystery but it's been impossible for anybody in the present to read because it literally makes no sense. I will now explain to you why it makes no sense, but it made no sense. It's like it's supposed to be a marriage song for Mary. If I say that it's a marriage song for Mary, what would you expect to read? Would that make any sense to you? What would you think it is? Fat says high kilts while you're thinking about it.
Hey, you fat. I'm sorry, I'm just really enjoying the fact that we've got a listener called Fat.
And think if you're in the unauthorized chat, Mel is always there with her entire sort of it's her signature of emojis, right? But they're always, if you know how Mel thinks, they're always little stories in all of the emojis she has. So the cross, the Greek cross, or she has both a plain cross and a she's Maronite, right? So prayer, Irish for the clover, a swan, an otter, a snowflake, a bear, a face dragon, a full dragon, mushrooms, Aquarius. Because fun fact, Mel and I have exactly the same birthday. Snowboarding and kayaking. This is actually topical. This is Mel trying to name herself through pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, and Mel says Sacred Sync today is the feast day of the evangelist Saint Luke. Perfect, right? So we're trying to describe Mary, and Saint Luke, poetic moment, is said to have been painted her, right? So he paints her visually, and we're trying to think about what the Mosaic Ark is, right? This is the Mosaic Ark. We are in the Mosaic Ark. We are painting Mary is the Mosaic Ark. I mean, it's like I say that bluntly, but nobody will understand what that means. So it's all of these things. But Mary is the Mosaic Ark, and we're painting her now.
Digital iconography.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we are trying firstly to explain why the Virgin Mary is the Mosaic Ark, in doing this so that everyone else understands, because the Western civilization has not retained this image in its Christianity,
right?
For the most part. So that's the first. The first mission is to remind everybody about the Ark of the Covenant, and who that gold covered acacia chest was designed to foreshadow the prototype type and the antitype. So yeah, I've got animals outside my door at the moment. They're all making sounds, so it's appropriate. We're talking about the Ark.
The Ark, yeah.
Going into the Ark, yeah.
Well, this is like just the Ark is all of it's Noah's Ark. It's the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes.
It's Mary, and it's like the Noah's Ark carries all of the animals, and the Ark of the Covenant is the throne of the Lord in His presence. He sits on the mercy seat, right? So it's actually His throne, and then Mary is the throne who carries the Creator of all those creatures.
Yes.
Oh, I just like, yes. Can anybody understand this but poets?
I don't know. I hope so. It comes so naturally to me. I don't understand how it's not obvious. I think this is the problem with not the problem, but this has been the beautiful thing about beginning the projects with you and the Drakes. Our team are trying to explain everything poetically because it's so difficult to explain all of this in any other form.
Right.
And if you have the kind of mind where someone says ark and you instantly recall 3 or 4 different things at the same time, which I do, then it's difficult to have a conversation unless people are able to come into that mentality, because um, it's a kind of synesthesia. It's a synesthesia that the Western civilization has lost, that it used to have. We did this stream on the polysemy, the 4 senses of scripture, but this is what it is, and it's this kind of sensorial experience of the scriptures, which is why I think when you say something like mystical, people get very very concerned and nervous, because it sounds like so much woo-woo. But if you're talking to someone and you say, no, it's a sensorial experience of scripture, they can say, oh, okay, well, that makes a little bit more sense, because now we're talking about the senses. But for our people, our church, we're talking about the senses as not just the physical senses, but there's a spiritual sense as well. And we have this synesthesia in that context, where you have all of the stories of the scriptures set up, and they're all facing each other. It's not just a linear beginning and end, beginning, middle, and end kind of story in the scriptures. We're looking at something which is kind of like it's like that that horrendous thing that they've constructed that U2 did the concert in. Where
the dome,
where it's like dome, this bubble, and of course they're in the middle, and Bono's going off in the middle, so it's like, but the that experience, that kind of dome-like structure of being able to have a audio-visual experience like that, where it's in a completely different. You're not looking at a flat surface. So I think this is probably the best way I can explain it. It's like the modern world looks at the scriptures like a screen. It's just flat. Whereas in the ancient times, people had this dome experience. The scriptures were facing themselves, all of these elements, all of these symbolic elements of the Old Testament and the New Testament were all facing each other, and you couldn't isolate one from another. It all had to be taken in all at the same time. So poetry does that for the mind. No other medium is going to allow people to enter that kind of headspace, and it's Am I making sense?
Like, I'm tripping off of this. It's great. I'm trying to. Well, because having done the reading, the other thing that I'm doing right now is I've been asked to review Margot Fassler's wonderful book on Hildegard of Bingen's cosmology, music, and imagery. And I'm sort of like, just as we write little bits at a time on our poetry, I've learned over the years you do have to, even for something as short as a book review, which is just 1,000 words usually, if you try to write it all in one sitting, it's not going to happen, because you'll just panic and put it off. I was like, back 10, 20, 15 years ago, I had a bad year when I was stressed out about how I was going to write Mary and the Art of Prayer, and I got such bad writer's block that I just had 2 or 3 book reviews that I'd agreed to do, and I had to send the books back because I just couldn't even write a book review, right? With the book reviews, it helps to do a little bit over a day. And I started working on the Margot's book a day or so ago. And as you're describing the dome, I mean, one of the things that Margot tried to do in order to make sense of Hildegard's poetic visions, which she made set to music, which she also had drawings done in her manuscripts for, Margot did a planetarium exhibit. Like, we're talking about domes, right? It's never mind YouTube and U2 and their dome. Like, if we could do Hildegard's cosmic egg in that Vegas dome, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. And that's when Margot, they had to design it computer graphics with the planetarium scale of stuff, which is like really high resolution. And you end up with just the choirs of angels circling around your head, and the egg, and oh my gosh, Yeah, so that's what I was thinking when you're describing all of that.
Oh, that's good.
And saying so to describe Christianity in that mode to people. So my class today for Eurociv, we were talking about Fourth Lateran Council, right? And the Fourth Lateran is all, it's like description of the creed and then canons on how the church is meant to operate and behave and such like that. And sort of getting everyone to the point of realizing that they all inhabit an expectation that you can have a society that's based on a shared understanding. Although they divided up into groups, and one thought they were thinking in theological terms and one thought they were thinking in more Enlightenment philosophical terms. I'm like, yeah, but you all are both describing the reality that you inhabit as being created by an understanding, not your kin group or something.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So that we've got to be able to understand how we inhabit this mythological imagination, because that's everything that we are is created mythologically. I mean, I think, you're saying it's ancient. It's also modern, right? It's like we all live in these electronic domes.
Yes. But I don't know if people are thinking about it in the sense that they realize that they've gone back into an ancient format of it's sort of like, oh, we're high tech now, so that's just tech, that's just the radio, that's just speakers in the retail store, that's like that's just fluorescent lights in the car park, it's like
right.
They don't seem to consciously understand that what they're living in is it's a kind of recreation of the ancient kind of experience of the world, where it's like you have this you have the acoustic field, as Marshall McLuhan was talking about. It's the surround sound, the acoustic field, where it's like information's coming in constantly and it's shifting and it changes. It's never fixed. People are living in this right now. They don't realize it. Then the way that the superstitions are emerging in this environment too is sort of becoming more and more obvious, and then but they're not thinking of it in the sense of superstition, or they're not thinking of things in like they have their desktop profile pictures, they're like, okay, I have a totem. Wait, what? No, that's not totem. I'm not thinking totemically. No, you are. You're starting to think totemically. This is a tribal behavior. So in the sense of like bringing that into biblical reading, the best way I can describe it is in the architecture of the old Orthodox churches. They had the dome. It was up there in the altar. We have these enormous icons of Christ, and we have the cherubim, and this the angels up there, and all of the apostles. The size difference between all of the icons also, it resembles the internet, because you have these, like, on the same screen you have these tiny little icons, and then you'll have a huge window open in the backgrounds, right? So it's like the brain is on the internet doing what we've been doing in these church environments, where you've got the same person with the image being microscopic and absolutely enormous and blown up in the background, and then scattered all around, like across the back wall. And then this has been happening for a long time in that church environment, but now it's sort of an electric format, and so everyone's doing it. They haven't realized what they're
I mean, you're describing, it's like, so we're talking about the way we're writing in our chat, but the other experience of the internet, and it's like thinking of Telegram or Facebook. I won't even tell you what it is, because I don't want anybody to Google this and find out what he blasted into it. Just like, not one of my friends that I know really well, he said, I went down this rabbit hole and I found these, and they were organic and it was really gross, and you're sort of flashed onto that. Now that's seared on my memory, and I'm gonna have to wait till I can forget it. And I will not tell you what it was, because you'll look it up, and it's, oh my gosh, it's like things flashing out at you constantly. And I do appreciate now mean, this is one of the other things that we've dealt with at the manners on the internet and such, that if you are not expecting to see something and there it suddenly is, and it's like, and never mind the pornography that apparently will flash out. I don't, happily somehow I don't usually end up seeing it, so either I'm not searching for the right stuff, or I'm got more protections around me and my search engines than I realized, but I don't know. But that, you know, you're describing the faces coming at you. If you scroll down a feed and here's a video, there's, you know, this, that. I am surprised that people are finding it hard to figure out what it is we're writing with our poetry, because we're trying to like bring all of this into a structured understanding by way of the stories that we're telling.
It's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. But
we are living, I like that you're saying we're living in this kind of dome world of spinning realities that are flashing at us from all of these different glass surfaces, which is what mosaics are. They're glass, backed with gold foil and such. Sorry, so our little iPhone, you know, it's like your screen backlit with light. I mean, all of that in medieval art design world is images of heaven, but they're in our devices, but they're hell.
Yeah. Well, they can be,
or heaven. I mean, it's the sort of sorting of all of these images.
Well, it's very loud visually. I don't know if a lot of other people have an image saturation, but it's sort of like this. I imagine what it must have been like for somebody to enter this kind of environment that has no exposure to mass advertising, and then suddenly you're in a world that's nothing but mosaic tiles that are flashing. There's not even fixed images. It's not even like the ancient mosaic where you just have the one thing, the one mosaic, it doesn't change. This is like living inside a kaleidoscope that you're actually walking around inside. So if you think about like this kind of digital world that we're in now is like this kaleidoscope you're walking around in, that's probably the best sense that I could say. That's mystical Christianity. That's looking at the scriptures like a kaleidoscope that you're walking around in. And then you have the tiles. They shift and change, not in a sense of you're looking at hell, but there's
hell is sometimes depicted in the mosaic, so you know. But maybe if you have access to that spiritual reality, it's going to be both heaven and hell, because you'll understand that they exist. Yes.
And then if you turn the kaleidoscope a little bit, you're going to get a different sense of meaning from the same point as well, which is why now that I think of it, it's interesting that St. Luke painted the Virgin. It's sort of like the entire kaleidoscope, this entire mosaic cannot make sense without the Ark, without Our Lady as the prime tile of the entire thing, because the Lord sits on her. So it's like in the iconography of the Orthodox Church, you were talking about this with holy smokes, Dustin, but she's not depicted like this very frequently in the West, whereas in the Coptic Church we always have this icon. It's the throne. Theotokos sits on the throne, and then she has Christ on her lap. This is very in every church. Always this icon is there, because it's not just that she's on the throne, shall I say? It's that she is the throne.
Exactly.
So we're looking at this icon all the time. So yeah, now that you've mentioned it, Saint Luke, he's painted the first tile for us to understand the fullness of the kaleidoscope of the scriptures.
Now I can explain to you what John of Garland did in the Epithalamium.
Oh, good.
So what modernity expects is movies, right? And so we spent the last couple of weeks talking about Jesus Christ Superstar, which has no Mary in it. We talked about that, right? There's Mary Magdalene, but there's no Mary.
Oh, no virgin.
There's no virgin.
No.
There's the bus,
no.
Right? And that's it. And that most modern Christians as well, they struggle a lot. I mean, even so, the debate went really well in class today. But at one point, we're trying to talk about, like, one group was saying, I'm saying, what do you all ground yourselves in? And they had understood that they could, identify themselves as Christian, but they kept saying, we're Christian. I'm like, what does that mean? And one of them was saying, well, it's, we have this Jesus prophet. And I'm like, a prophet? Right. And these, I mean, some of these are students who I know are actually Catholic. Right. And I'm saying, wow, Fourth Lateran, they were worrying about preaching to the people so that they could understand this mystery, which is John of Garland lived in the early 13th century. So he's actually completely contemporary with this problem. It's like, how do you explain the faith? How do you talk about these mysteries? And what I can tell in modernity is, for the most part, people are terrible at it. They're good at a kind of what are they good at? They're focused on feelings, which we've talked about a lot, right? It's like the feeling of this or that. Yes. Now I've just flashed in the kaleidoscope to Piers Morgan in that interview with the Egyptian, a TV host or comedian. I wasn't quite sure what he was, but one of the things Piers was interviewing Hassan, somebody to look it up for me, right? About what's going on in Gaza, and Piers said something like, I think I've thought about this a lot, and I think I feel blah 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 blah, and I'm like, that is so interesting, right? It's like he was judging on the basis of his feelings, what the situation, the resolution of this terrible situation in Gaza. And I'm like, that's so interesting. It's like, you're not thinking, you're just thinking you feel. That for most modern Christians, feeling is the category of reality that they start from, right? It's like devotion is about your feelings, and mystical doesn't mean anything, because mysticism is not necessarily affective. It's not just about what you feel. It's also this contemplative understanding, which may not have any feelings whatsoever, right? It's this very, you could say, very cerebral, but it's I mean, our poetry, it's trippy. Our poetry is very cerebral too, because you've got to actually pay attention to the interplay of all of these associations and references and allusions and wordplay and such. Otherwise you cannot understand what we're talking about. So we are not writing poetry that's going to make you feel, pretty or something like that. Right? Most modern devotion is both narrative in the sense of it's about characters that you can see in a play, right? Like in Jesus Christ Superstar. And it's about, both Judas and Mary Magdalene in the movie are feeling, right? Judas is upset with Jesus because he's scared of the way Jesus is getting the crowds to behave, and Mary Magdalene is singing about love and not knowing how to love him. And that's modern understandings of how we access this mystery of the incarnation.
Well, it's flat screen experience.
How so? And you're right, I think it is, but how do you mean?
I think it's because of the way you describe this, thinking about the historical Jesus. It's this is difficult to explain, actually.
Well, this is
see, you just proved our point.
Well, and I proved our point. We had no idea whatsoever when I turned on this stream that this is where we were going to end up, and we were in like a super duper cool theological mystical place. A mere hour in. Guess where we're going to be by the end of the second hour.
The
flat screen. Well, what I think of it's like looking through a window at other people's acting. I think it's like, and there's a from the 16th century with print and books and Ignatius Loyola, you do develop a practice of watching the scene. Loyola has a lot of interesting instructions in his spiritual exercises on smelling hell, or he's like, hear it and smell it and see it, but it's theatrical in the sense of it's you are watching this play.
I think maybe that's why I'm saying it's difficult to describe, because when with this two-dimensional perception, it's like watching a soap opera versus time traveling. It's really difficult to explain. It would be the difference between someone saying to you, okay, so Christ and the disciples, they're sitting in the olive grove. Okay, they're in an olive grove, so what? And then actually finding yourself in one day and realizing that you have the fullness of the senses that the writers in the Gospels had put in there by saying they were in the olive grove. It's like I'm not doing a very good job at explaining this. This is the kind of thought that I would have to write down, but
well, let me rescue you.
Please do help.
So Mel it's Bassem Youssef, heart surgeon turned comedian who was talking to peers. Black Bear, welcome Black Belt Bear. He says, hi, loved your talks about Jesus Christ Superstar. Still working on part 2. Well, this is kind of the part 3, but the mystical version. So we're out there in the Jesus Christ Superstar. Okay, so what I was describing with the, imagine yourself watching the scene and imagine yourself feeling, it's this very theatrical understanding. That is what I realized I wanted the epithalamium that I'm working on. It's by a man named John of Garland. The reason I started working on all of this poetry in the back of my mind back when we started in 2020 was I did a transcription of John's epithalamium back in graduate school. It's about 6,000 lines, and I realized Draco Alchemicus, when we write it, is going to be not quite that long. When we finish it, it'll be 4,500 lines. If we do our 100 stanzas per 5 acts, it's going to be like 3/4 of what 4,500 versus 600. Yeah, about 3/4 of the length of John of Garland's epic poem, right? So we're up there, right? But I transcribed it all. And then it's incredibly difficult Latin, and I tried to do a translation of it, and then I sent it out to get reviewed to say whether or not, different publishers were interested in taking it. And, I got some good feedback from them, and I did get a contract for it, which I may need to renegotiate because it took me to kind of been sitting on this for a little bit. I couldn't write the translation well enough to fit the poetry that he had written. We will now explain why. See, I want to keep this mysterious and not just let you know what it is. John of Garland was a grammarian. He taught in the University of Paris. He seems to have come from England. Was probably of modest birth, but then goes to the University of Paris and is teaching there in the early 13th century. He spends a little bit of time in Toulouse and then goes back to Paris. But what he mainly taught was writing, it seems like, or poetry. He also has a handbook on writing poetry. He did this epithalami, and he also did a book on another poem on the triumph of the church, which was a narrative of the Crusades. That one does have a new translation that came out a few years ago, which is just great. He was, as many people are now with education, worried that the students weren't learning great Latin, right? We're worried about our students, our children, not learning the best English, right? Not having the richness of the allusions and the education and the stories and the vocabulary and the all of the stuff that we're basically putting in our poems. John was worried about that in the 13th century because he was convinced nobody knew good enough Latin. So he wrote these poems, ironically enough, as for students, right? They're this impossible, convoluted, wonderful, elusive, difficult Latin because he was writing to keep his students entertained.
It's medieval Common Core.
Well, sort of. I mean, he is. We are actually. I mean, the backstory. Big reveal, right? We're trying to make it so that I can translate John of Garland as well as he wrote these poems, and particularly the poem about Mary. But this is where I got stuck, because one of my colleague friends in the field, Georgiana Donovan, did a lovely book that she very elusively entitled Scribit Mater, which is a joke. If you know the great hymn of Mary standing under the cross, is the Stabat Mater, which is what most people think of as what characterizes late medieval Marian devotion, which is she's standing under the cross suffering with Christ. So the sort of the place you expect to see Mary, for example, in Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, is that, right? That she stands under the cross and suffers all of his pains, in fulfillment of Luke, the prophecy that Simeon makes in Luke of a sword shall pierce through your own heart also. So that it's like, stay with us. All the threads come together. I do remember everything I've said in the last hour, and I can bring it all in, I hope. Georgiana's book Scribit Mater is punning on that Stabat Mater, which I think I still need to explain a little more. But the Scribit is Mary, the mother writes, right? So the Stabat Mater is the mother stood. The Scribit Mater is the mother writes. And what Georgiana shows is how much education and grammar is tied up with devotion to Mary. Okay, now that's kind of cool because, of course, she's the mother of, guess what? The Word. So they're very interested in showing the way in which good grammar is tied up with the logos in our contemporary discussions of they would say verbum because he's the word, and that articulate speech is in fact a form of, this realization of our full humanity, but it's the problem of describing the incarnation that gives them the need to have that exquisite speech. I think I lost a thread or two in there.
No, I'm tracking.
You are. Nobody else is. Everybody with me? At the moment, it's mainly Casey and Mel, so that they'll be able to keep up. But Black Belt Bear and Fat, if they're still there, we may need to let us know that whether I've explained it or not. Okay.
So this is
Stabat Mater and Scribit Mater, and I'm going to give you another one in a second. But carry on, ask a question.
Oh, well, it's like the incarnation. So she's writing the logos that previously has only been spoken.
Yes, to a certain extent. So Georgiana in Scribit Mater writes about John of Garland and it does this lovely pun how he's a grammarian, G-A-R-M/Marian. So in trying to describe Mary in language, he's doing this grammatical training, which he does do in this poem because it's It's incredibly sophisticated and complicated in terms of the poetic forms and such that he uses. I still haven't told you what it's about, which and this, I mean, this can be a problem in our talking about our devotion, because you can do all the meta level sort of structural stuff and never get to the core of what's going on. In the Marian commentaries on the Song of Songs that I was working on, they are starting to get into this Stabat Mater meditation, right? Mary in love with Christ, suffers with him. And the one that I did do in greatest depth, the William of Newborough, he's giving her like speeches that about, for example, let me suffer with you, let me die with you, let me drink the cup with you. So he they can inhabit Mary's feelings by way of this commentary on the Song of Songs. That's what I thought John of Garland was writing too, because he wrote this marriage song of Mary, and I was encountering it in the company with looking at these Song of Songs commentaries where they're imagining the love between Christ and Mary, and it's a marriage song. You think it's going to be Mary's, marriage with, well, either Christ or God, depending on how you say it. But it should be like a love story in which she's the bride, she gets to be, wedded to God, and that's the story, right?
Is it?
No. Which has made this poem impossible for me to summarize, almost as difficult. In fact, 30 years worth of difficult, off and on. I work on it for a year or two, and then I go off and do other things, and I come back to it a decade later, right? So it's I'm not sure how much actual time of working, maybe 3 years, but it's been spread out over some time. Trying to explain what this poem is about has been as difficult as explaining what the Dragon Common Room is about.
That's comforting.
I finally, thanks to the right work we've done in the Dragon Common Room, got to the place where I can explain the Mosaic Ark that John of Garland describes in the Epithalamium Beata Maria Virginis. Okay, are we ready? Okay. So first, it helps to summarize what the actual narrative is, which does have a narrative, which is about as convoluted as talking about what we do in the Dragon Common Room. It starts with a debate between Justice and Mercy before the throne of heaven. Justice is complaining about, there's layers. Astrea, who is a justice figure in classical antiquity, and is in Ovid and things like that. So John is trying to play off all of the things that he's been reading, right? If you think you haven't done your homework now, based on all of the things that Kiltz and I are doing off the top of our heads tonight, try to do that with John of Garland and his reading. His you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You try to do that with all of the classics and everything that John is doing and he's referencing and stuff like that. Okay, so Astrea, Justice, flees from earth because there's so much sin and vice, and she goes to heaven before the throne of God and says, it's horrible down there. And various virtues, faith and hope and mercy, plead before the throne to say, we've got to do something about this, please. And so God decides to make a place for himself to become incarnate. Although it's not quite how John says it, but it is what is happening. So next we move to the Holy Land, which is topical and on everybody's mind right now, where the Virgin is they do have some description of her conception and nativity and such like that. But Mary is born and she's prepared, right? Now, all of this theoretically is describing her from the outside, right? You see her, she's beautiful, she's learned, she spends her childhood in the temple and such. And then the story becomes impossible to follow, because at this moment, the angel comes to her, announces that she's, going to be, is she the bride of God, or is she the bridal chamber of God? And there's this, I realized this incredible inside out movement. It's like God is in heaven, right? Mary is on earth, prepared to be the place where God becomes incarnate. Where God is heaven. And it's like
Mhm.
your pictures that you're describing, that she's
Yes,
the
yes.
throne that Christ enters into, and then it's like it turns inside out. So now she suddenly contains all of the
Mm.
creatures that God made, because now she contains the creator of all who made, and the virtues and vices come with him. And now we have like a tournament of it's a psychomachia, right? We have this big tournament of virtues
Mhm.
and vices. It's all happening as it's in her mind, but it's also in her. It's like she becomes the field of battle for this battle between the virtues and vices. It's incredibly easy at this point to read that battle as something she's leading, right? So she's a Joan of Arc character lead. No, it's like it's all happening inside her, because this mystery is all happening inside her. The bard shows up and sings the deeds of the Savior, all happening still inside her.
Mm.
And then it turns inside out again, because then she's assumed into heaven. But now it's like she's like this double inside out thing. So she, as the place where God becomes present, is assumed into heaven at the end, celebrated as the bride of God, but she's also the bridal chamber from which the God. Nobody can explain this.
It's very cool.
And it's and then I realized it's like the reason the poets are all trying to do this. The people who become the men who become poets, and particularly the poets, are constantly saying this stuff, and this is all in Mary and the Art of Prayer, second chapter,
Mm.
where they're saying Mary's impossible to describe because she contains he whom the heavens and earth could not contain, who made the heavens and earth. She's like the cloister for God who made everything. So ark, ark, ark.
Yes.
It's like this like you're describing the dome that the YouTube dome that all this is happening in. So she's the dome where all of creation happens.
Yep.
You thought our sort of meditating on what
Kingdom.
Kanye West said this time last year was trippy, eh? Amateur.
The kingdom.
Yes. Nice.
Yeah. It's very trippy. Yeah, this is not a linear thought process.
Right.
This is not something that the flat screen linear mind is going to be able to wrestle with. You have to go into you have to go into you have to go into dome.
I'm liking this image. It's very much where it's like it works in our architecture. And the place I got to in my writing about this with John today was thinking, it's like you've got this narrative and you're saying, how would you even describe Mary when you realize who she is, which is this I think you shared on your channel something that's like digital Mobius turning wheel thing that turns inside and outside and inside and outside.
Oh yeah.
It's like that's it. This is inside, which is inside and which is outside, because she's a creature who contains the creator. Therefore, she is the heaven who is earth. Wait.
Yeah. The Mobius loop.
This is who she is. This is my translation of John's opening. Okay, so John of Garland is writing this epithalamium in the early 13th century to help his students have fun learning difficult Latin, but also at the same time to describe all of the ways in which the creatures are themselves in Mary. And so, there's like a whole, my favorite scene is where he's talking about cockfight, like the birds. and they're the model of how the martyrs go to battle or something like that. But it's also like he has a court of birds because the Christ is the phoenix, and so we have the whole like extended allegory of all of the different birds. Like, so we have birds. When he describes the Holy Land, it's like all the trees and spices that inhabit the Holy Land, or grow in the Holy Land. It's like nothing but catalogs of all of these. So it's a kind of vocabulary builder that he's writing. But it's also his effort in language to illustrate, make visible, because he has to do it in poetry, the ways in which all of these things constantly turn inside out and outside in. Alice in Wonderland has nothing on John of Garland. Just saying.
Mhm.
And what I realized, this is where the mosaic comes in, realizing what he's in fact creating is this mosaic of creatures through which you see Mary.
Mhm.
But he starts out with her as a flower. So here, this is like the opening 14 lines, my translation. The Latin can do things grammatically that English can't, like with cases and such. So it's a little tricky to translate. But realize think of, if you can think of, as I'm reading this, a rose window that the light shines through, that where she's shown as the one holding Christ, and then the rose window gives light into the church, which then illuminates the vaults and the arches, and that this is all a way of meditating on that dome imagery, which says what happens when God enters into the world through her. Triumphal court of the virtues, flowery virgin, flowery bride of God, flowery mother, hail. You are fragrant with the delights of the bridegroom, a rose dewy from the font of highest good, pleasing in the mirror of your font. Adorned you shine, reflected in your living image. The living font shines forth from the font, born image of the Father. You, the splendor of life from the image of the living font, the ray of the sun to whom in your radiance you gave birth. You burst forth with life, you are fragrant with fame. You drip with piety, you are fruitful with offspring, you are verdant with modesty. You are a flower, a lover of the flower, most pleasing to the flower, you bring forth the flower. O flower created by your flower, drawn from the font, you return to the font for love of the font. The font flows into the river when the author becomes his work. The you are a flower, lover of the flower, most pleasing to the flower, you bring forth the flower, a flower created by your flower, is that couplet is a playing on like declension in Latin of flower. It's nominative,
Okay.
nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. So it's what you're saying, it's like the incarnation of the word coming into our human speech and our physical reality takes on all of the complexities of the word, which is our grammar, which we said we started with the grammar of the internet, right? Well, this is the grammar of the incarnation.
The grammar check of the universe. That's really cool.
And all of the stuff that what I was reading, thinking about her as she's the source of the source, the font of the font. She's reflected in the mirror of the source. There's all this thing about she's the fountain, the flower who brings forth the flower, but who was created by the flower. So there's this constant mirroring that we've been trying to in Draco Chemicals, we're trying to show the way all this mirroring happens, and it's going to happen also in the way in which sin develops out of the mirroring. But what Mary is always doing is perfectly mirroring God. So everything that is the creator is also mirrored. Dante may have read this poem. It's very likely that John of Garland he's so popular throughout the later Middle Ages that there's even 15th century copies of his book being used to train students in grammar, right? And he is popular enough that it's possible all this flower imagery is what Dante is drawing off of when he's describing Mary as Rose. Although this kind of imagery is fairly normal in the 13th century, so it's not necessary. But I was thinking about this as Dante does the same kind of inside out thing when he has the pilgrim, the Dante character in the poem, ascend to the choirs of angels that then flip inside out. It's like he's been going up through the spheres of the heavens, and then that all flips inside out, and then you see Mary at the center of the rose, and that the very center of the rose is the Trinity, which you can't describe anymore because it's this wheeling, turning wheel of love within love. we meant it when we're writing a love story, but it's within this love story of Christ showing himself through his entering into the story, which is far more trippy than just he shows up on the bus when you haven't seen him.
Yeah, the bus isn't a kaleidoscope experience. No, we have a cloud of pigeons knitting photons together into a physical body. Trippy.
All very trippy. And I love how we've gotten in the description tonight of saying, and you all are in this too, right? If you're in the internet,
Yes.
if you're listening to us, if we're coming to you in this digital light form through our window that we have for the stream, as it were, we're trying to show how this is a participation in Christianity. It's not, everyone's worried about the AI taking over and everything. Well, yes, it could, but the reality of our have you done the reading, are you in the book, is it's like one of the great meditations they have in the 13th century is Mary's book, right? And she's the book that contains the book, who wrote the book, the book that contains the author that wrote the book. It's like we're closer to, we are in a new space in media terms with the internet to be able to understand some of these things that hasn't been accessible since the Middle Ages. Which is kind of wonderful.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's very cool. I'm thinking about the AI as a mirror of man, because that's really all it is. Everyone's freaking out about it, but really all that is a mirror of us. Why that's so damaging is because we're mirroring our own fallen nature. So it's sort of that, again, it goes back into that twinning and flipping problem that that we're dealing with in the story. But yeah, we're in a medieval medium. It's wonderful. Yeah. And we can be mystical, and it can make sense in this medium, whereas it doesn't make sense in the two-dimensional as much.
Well, one of the things that comes with printing, I suppose, you have mystics like Teresa of Avila or John of the Cross, famously, and they publish books. But a lot of this sense of the sort of light and color and inside outness, it's not accessible when people are focused on books as printed things. It's there in the manuscript world, which is a little bit what. So I'm saying I'm writing this review of Margot Fassler's book. One of the things she's trying to show in that is the way Hildegard is working with this cosmology. Then puts into these visions that she helps design the images for the manuscripts for, and then there's music, which includes things like a song of the virtues, a play of the virtues. So it's all, all of this folds back into the kind of imagery that Joan of Garland is working with. And what I realized also writing the Mosaic, this Mosaic Ark meditation on John, is I kept trying to press John into not just the Stabat Mater, but the Scribet Mater, the expectation of narrative that modernity has given us. We should be looking for the historical Mary with certain actions, and devotion to Mary needs to be on her as a model person, right? And John gives no sense of her as a personality at all. She's the field where the virtues battle, but she's so this reflection of her creation that there's not a person of, personality is, I guess, fallenness and our flaws and sins and stuff like that. I don't know, but their personification allegories running around throughout all of this, but there's no, I'm going to be devoted to Mary because she's this kind of
she's a good person.
Right, like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's no that good
yeah. It's
person there. This is cosmic bedchamber
yeah.
for the, and it's Psalm 18:6, right? When the bridegroom comes forth from his bedchamber like a giant, right, and then strides across the
Mm.
sun, and that psalm is trying to show the sort of the sun emerging from his rest, as it were, and striding across the zodiac kind of feel.
Mm.
All of this stuff is in the Psalms. It's utterly trippy,
Mm. Mm.
but very hard for modern readers to get to unless they allow themselves into this kaleidoscope dome, the kaleidoscope dome.
Mm. Yeah, the kingdom. It's a kaleidoscope. It's not the 2D flat thing, or a a kind of flat uh, moral tool. Even though the morality aspect is part of this, but um, I don't know. Like our ongoing theme of the rave, it makes sense to me that this is the way that people could begin to understand it, because the that kind of space, a rave is set up as a kind of temple experience. You have all of the multisensorial things, the elements there. It's multisensorial. So you have the beginning of something that is like a mystical experience of Christianity, and then you have your focus point, your altar. You've got the DJs at the front and everything. There's a lot of art installations and whatever. You've got your incense and a lot of spices going on, but I think that's probably the best way of like trying to explain what it's like to bring people into ancient Christianity. You're going to be raving. It's just not in the sense of hedonistic a hedonistic experience. It's not it's not something that you can go into, and it's sort of like everyone's going to have their own interpretation of what happened, and you're going to come out with your truth, and he's going to come out with his truth, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Because that's the rave that people are used to. This is the ancient Israelite experience, which is not he has his truth and she has her truth, and we've all got our own truths. We're looking at the truth, him, Christ.
Right.
So if you start to change your mindset and see Mary as Ark, then this, I think, Mary as Ark is like the focal point of the rave of Christianity. Again, not as a hedonistic thing, but the point where we focus to access our Creator. And what that would really mean isn't just looking at the 1973 remake of the gospel story,
right,
where they just get off a bus, you know.
Well, the thing is, they want to be there in all of the music and the setting and the dancing and things like that. I mean, it's like it's designed as if it's going to be a rave, but they get off a bus.
Yes, they get off a bus. So there's no continuity. I think that's probably the problem with that is that there's no continuity. They just get off the bus. Whereas in the Virgin Mary, we have a continuity with the entire story of the Israelites going back all the way into the Old Testament and everything. So there's that thread that needs to be there, or else things just start to unravel.
Right, in the movie it's the overture in the hills and the bus, and indeed Jesus comes out of nowhere.
Yes.
And why are you superstar? And who are you?
Why are you here?
And I don't know who you are.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you? What are you doing here? Why'd you get off a bus? Um,
Yeah, that's very good.
it's this poof, like it's like me when I put random things in the plot. You tell me off because
Hey, I was trying to
just
put
made up
vitamins
something.
in yesterday's stanza, and you were saying, no, it doesn't fit. And I'm like, no, it really does.
Yeah.
And happily, Casey came in and fixed it for us so we could stop. It's like trying to
She
convince
did.
each other of the. Actually, you won because she fixed it so that
The great cereal wars of DCR.
the cereal wars, Kellogg is grape nuts a health food. You guys are curious now, right?
Well, that's it. She's the thread. So I posted something before I finish this rant. There's a. I'll
and
try
we go
and
off on
explain it.
breakfast cereal, right?
Yeah, well, before we go to Kellogg's, the manuscript that I posted on my channel in the last, however it is in internet eons,
Yeah.
and it's an old Ge'ez manuscript from Ethiopia, and they have Mariam, they have the Virgin Mary's name written in Ge'ez, Mariam, and it's written in gold, real gold. So the whole manuscript is like normal lettering, and then you've got gold right there. So that's like. The best for me, this is the best way to kind of like summarize this entire rambling is that Mary is gold. Everyone understands if there's a gold thread in a tapestry, you see it, you notice it immediately. And that's probably the best way I can explain it. The scriptures have this thread that is missing without understanding Mary as the the point where the creator emerges, not just a bus that he's not appearing on a bus. If he appears on a bus, there's no gold. The gold's it's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but what I'm also thinking is like we start like truly just like we're gonna just improv this tonight. We're gonna go where the Spirit takes us, and we started in an ordinary place of I'm rewriting the website so that we're ready to publish and not confuse people completely that haven't encountered us before. We're a team of poets, really, and artists, and we write original stories grounded in traditional Christian symbols. Okay, now we're off.
Buckle up.
Buckle up. Because do you understand what the traditional Christian symbolism? It's really all in the scriptures. For sure, right? If you've read the Bible, all of this is there. But the place to start, right? It's like most people are just getting off a bus. And I do think, I mean, throughout all of this is a giant prayer for what's going on in the Holy Land right now, which is very, very sorrowing and sad. And I don't, so as it were, blame Christians, but I do blame us for not being better at explaining the mystery, to bring people into it, to invite people into this rave. We've gotten very, very bad at it, and we've turned it into, and this I was having to well, it was a really good class today. I really, really enjoyed it. But at some point saying you have to explain Christianity. You can't just say we are Christian. It's like that doesn't mean anything. It's this mystery that has labels. It's a gang signs. Everyone goes around saying, we're Christian. We're going to live by, Judeo-Christian values. And like, I don't know what those are. You haven't actually shown people the interior of this marvelous flower. So, or the land, or what it means that Jesus was born there. Nothing, right? It's turned into not even military banners, right? It's turned into this. Well, I realized as a problem, it's basically vengeance cycles of kin groups that are not trying to understand themselves as brought into this mystery, but simply teaming up. It's all happening on campus right now. It's like there's the Students for Justice in Palestine, and there's going to be a prayer group for the Jewish students tomorrow, and it's all separating out. I mean, faculty are suddenly now starting to recognize why we don't want to have taking sides on issues in our institutional situation, because otherwise
Yeah.
within it you can't take different sides. And it's been very interesting to me feeling how everyone, they want us being like Judas in the play, taking
Oh
sides
yeah. Oh
in
yeah.
this
Yeah.
military conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody immediately was demanding that everyone uh, um, promise an eternal allegiance to the whatever side they were on the moment that the footage came out from the Holy Land, which is, I mean, I've said my piece about this over the course of it all happening, but I don't know, the hijacking an institution like where you're working for allegiance to a side in a military conflict is dangerous, because the thing that everybody's forgetting is that even the people that are involved in the conflict itself have been propagandized, which is why they're involved in the conflict itself.
Right.
So if you don't have anybody that's willing to look beyond a propagandized interpretation of what's going on, because we know from what's happened the last couple of decades, every invasion or conflict or whatever, there's a lag time, and then eventually something comes out and we find out that a whole bunch of things were said at the time to get
Right.
everybody involved in a conflict that turned out not to be true.
Right.
It's happened over and over and over again. I mean, weapons of mass destruction. Does anybody remember that? It's when Iraq was flattened, and that's just one example. So it's like everybody seems to forget that this has happened a lot. Before, we had some time to sit down and have at least some protests or some debates before we were seeing the kind of things happening that have been leaked into the media and footage that's coming out now. So it's like this intense demand. 1 week, I mean, talk about something feeling like it's the Passion Week.
Yeah.
We've gone from like Hosanna to this intense demand to crucify him, and it's like, okay, this is interesting. You see the human dynamic, but the shift in public opinion. One Palm Sunday, everyone thinks in one way, and then by the next weekend, they're putting their own Messiah to death on a cross. If anybody can imagine how that can happen, we've watched it in real time in a whole week of seeing people that have said, "Oh, don't trust the media. Mainstream media is incorrect. Don't trust them." Like, wow.
No, that's actually a good point. It's like suddenly, oh, we're gonna now believe them. Yeah,
exactly. And so, yeah, the demand for the allegiance, I think, is just a part of this. Whoever is responsible, whoever is doing whatever they're doing. I mean, I've always known this, but the thing that everyone didn't do was sit down and realize that the people on both sides of that border have been propagandized in some way, one way or another. They are, and to think about what's happening now without acknowledging that is the problem. And it feeds the people that will benefit the conflict. People will benefit from this. So yeah, Christians maybe who thought that that region was just a very hyper-religious little, hyper-religious utopia for everybody to be able to quietly practice their faith. Maybe now they're starting to understand that things are not what they were told. The situation isn't the way that it's been presented to them previously. Maybe that Jewish people in the diaspora have been told that there is a particular hope for them over there, that things are going to be a certain way, and that they are invited to join maybe they will think again. I mean, I don't know. Like the consequences of what's going on there. Someone has an agenda. Many people have agendas, but there's a lot of things happening. I think that they're going to be surprised by. And yeah, I'm ranting, but it's absolutely horrifying to see it. There are no like. There's no way of explaining this. The way that everybody's been dehumanized within a week. It's horrifying. It's like watching COVID when it suddenly the anti-vaxxers were fit for the camps, and they didn't deserve healthcare, and they didn't deserve this and that, and they should be left to die on the streets, and don't give them anything because they refused the vaccine. We just went through all of this before, not that long ago. Suddenly now we're seeing entire populations of people being dehumanized, and nobody pausing. Yeah, it's horrifying. Yeah. And Christians can be the ones to refuse to take a side and take God's side.
Take God's side, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your rooster was crowing, so I know we hit the right point.
He's horrible, by the way.
Oh yeah,
like he's amazing.
How has your rooster been?
Well,
the cockfights. So I'm gonna have to like do a proper translation of where John O'Garland ends up using the cockfight, and it's like this really detailed description of the birds, and they've puffed themselves up and spread their wings and stuff like that. You could tell that he was writing for boys, right? And I'm going to give you some difficult Latin, but it's going to be fun. But interestingly, that this difficult Latin that it's going to be fun is about this battle of the virtues and vices in the mind and soul and body of the Virgin. It's amazing. The battle that's going to take place in the Virgin who is in the Holy Land.
That tracks.
Yep.
That tracks. Jerusalem. Oh well. Before I will not say much, but he's horrible. He's very aggressive. I have replaced my Elvis Presley, my beautiful Elvis Presley, with a thug.
Oh dear. He needs chivalric training, is what you're saying.
He needs chivalric training. He's quite possibly the most amazing guard animal I've ever owned. But yeah, he needs some polishing for sure. There's a bit of a psychomachia going on in that rooster.
Oh my.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think if we've succeeded in demonstrating the difficulty of having done your reading, as I promised in the advertisement for this, we invite you all in, but it's a trip. How's that? And that we take. I mean, I think that to say we take very seriously the difficulty of explaining the mystery, but also, as my colleagues always love to say, the urgency of doing so, because it is the world at stake. I keep wondering what's like, are we getting closer to explaining the love story that we are trying to show for people? Maybe we'll get to it when we finish writing Draco Chemicus, so. But the sense of, Christ entered into all of this and suffers, and that there isn't each year that we've been in the different kind of media internet world, and I think whatever's happening in the Holy Land right now, a lot of, just what you're describing, a lot of it is happening in the internet, in the sense of the reality or not of the images that people are seeing, and of the feelings that they're having because of the images that they're seeing, and we're not there, so do we know what's going on? That sense of being caught up in a conflict is as much in our imaginations and the things that were being shown on the internet as otherwise. I got lost there. What was I thinking about?
I think it was appropriate that this all started at a rave party.
Yeah.
It really was. It's the it's a trip that has started at a rave, because the war is like the war is a bad trip, and this is not to demean what's happening or to oversimplify it or ignore carnage and horror, but this is like the kaleidoscope getting turned into the worst aspects of the human soul all at once.
Right. And which, I remember what else I was saying, that Christ in getting caught up in all of this, I mean, that cosmic necessity of Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Because the option always is cycles of violence. It's Father, forgive them, they know not what they do, and some way out of it, and he sacrifices so that the cycles of violence don't keep going. And that tends to be what I'm hearing, as it were, from both sides. And the it's like this violence, well, deserves answer, but that violence came from this other violence, and then it's the I mean, the Beowulf problem of this endless feuding that the characters' families get into. And that's what I was also thinking about, that there's our understanding ourselves within the incarnation as made in the image and likeness, and all of us participating in it, versus, and then I realized it was like the impulse to say those are monsters and we're human. You can see it in Beowulf too. We've been reading that in our class, that what I think is being triggered in everyone is the need to band with the family, right? And you never judge the family has never done anything wrong, because it's just those other people who are now not our family, which is then also what Christians are supposed to be trying to understand, is the way in which we are all family, and can't let ourselves be caught in that feud, because there is no other family. But but unfortunately, and this also came out in my class today, playing with the Fourth Lateran Council, the external vision of Christians is we're part of that feuding. You just want to, send the Inquisition after everybody. No, there's got to be a way out, and it's like, and the understanding of the kaleidoscope as the reality, and being able to show people that not just as a, well, this is our truth and you have your truth. No, we're all in this kaleidoscope, caught up in it, in that rave of creation.
We'll start making more maps.
We need a map.
Yeah.
Right now on the website, there's a placeholder map, which is of Psalter from 13th century, showing Christ over the world as the creator, and in the world, in his creation is the scope of all of humanity. So it's all completely topical.
Jerusalem at the center.
With Jerusalem at the center. Our Father, send us peace. Well, this has been our smallest audience ever, but we know who the real the writers are. And all the rest of you that are watching now, this is what happens in the writer's room. You see now.
They're gonna have to
You
trip for
see
breakfast.
now. You see now. We welcome you in to the love story.
Yeah. Yeah. Try it. Try seeing things poetically as a way of, I don't know. It's like falling in love. It is.
I for real started crying when I realized that that's what we were doing. I was being pressed to say, what is it you're doing? It's not a fairy tale. It's not this. It's not that. What is it? Subtitle. I need it now. And I'm like, boo-hoo, it's the love story. Truth comes through tears.
Yeah.
God loves us all. Christians, Muslims, and Jews. We are all his children. Amen, says Casey.
Amen.
Thank you all for joining us. We can't promise anything from week to week. You know that. We'll be back. We can promise that. Good night.
Bye.